Hello, welcome back to the MLB DFS Slate Breakdown for Thursday, August 24th. We got a small little slate today. I think it's 5-gamer. Hopefully we do not have any postponements or game suspensions, because it definitely is a chance. Keep an eye out on the weather for today's slate, without a doubt. All right, so what we will be going over today is we will start with the perfect lineups from yesterday and the winning lineups on both DraftKings and FanDuel. After that, projected ownership for the pitchers and some, pivots to consider, followed by the stacks ownership, highest owned, and some others to consider here. And without further ado, let's get into it. But before we do, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to all our videos. And also, I do want to bring up notification to this that our price will be going up in 10 days. The start of football season is right around the corner. Our price is going up for that. But if you get in before then, your $29.99 per month price or $199.99 price is locked in for at least a year. So get in while you can. Get in now. And let's have a day. All right, guys. Let's get into it. All right. So perfect lineup on DraftKings. We are rocking with Dean Kremer and Charlie Morton. Morton was just unbelievable yesterday. That is 2 good starts in a row for him. Just bring this up real quick, is 2 games in a row where he's had 10 Ks and only 1 walks. That is his Achilles heel. He gives up walks when he's able to limit guys on base. The guy is still an absolute stud like he has been the last 2 games. Let's hopefully that continues for the Braves and good old Charlie Morton. As in my best ball teams, I would definitely like that to continue as we work into the semis. All right, lineup wise, we got Ozuna just crushing it still. But the real story of the day was Aaron Judge, and his 3 home runs. Just had an absolutely massive day. So there is a little Yankees stack there. Outside of that, it's all one-offs, which, happens routinely on smaller slates here, where one team doesn't absolutely go off. And, we had several teams put up 7 or 9 runs yesterday, but Judge did most of the 9 for the Yankees there. So, the winning lineup, we got Giant Squid, took home the win. He had Charlie Morton and Kramer, so he nailed the perfect lineup. Then he had a Cincinnati stack with a 3-man Yankee stack. So, simple 5-3 stack, got it done for him. And, it was a contrarian stack. Nobody was on Cincinnati, and they kind of crushed. So, congrats to Giant Squid. He got it done. He is 50K richer now. Let's check out FanDuel. Oops. And all right, we got Morton. We got 2-man Yankees, 2-man Boston. Ozuna is still in it, and some one-offs from there on out. So almost took all the salary, 338 points. And the winning lineup, Lone Hicks, took home 20K. He had Morton. He had a 4-man Yankees stack, a 3-man Boston, and then 1 Baltimore player put up 37. Santander just had himself a game. What's funny is it went totally overlooked because of Judge's 3 home runs, 6 RBI game, but those 2 had a game. Way to go. Congrats to Lone Hicks. You got it done. Also, just to let you know, because I was going to keep trying, Giant Squid is 150 maxer, so he did have 30 or 150 lineups in yesterday's. I am not sure about FanDuel, as it's so much harder to check. All right, now let's get into it. Let's get over, we'll start off at DraftKings, go with some projected ownership, get my head out of the way. All right, so Pablo Lopez, highest owned pitcher on the slate, coming in at 39% owned, 10.6K. He's obviously one of the best pitchers on the slate, so it is no surprise that he's getting some ownership here. Now, there is good hitting conditions in Minnesota today, so it might be a little harder for him to have a good game because of that. But the dude has been pitching absolutely amazing lately. 2.29 FIP, 28% K rate over his last 5 starts. I mean, he's been good on the entire year with a 3.2 FIP and 29% K rate. He does have a very tough matchup versus Texas. He is also allowing 31% hard contact, so a decent amount of hard contact. And Texas splits are pretty good versus righties here. They have a 200 ISO, 353 WOBA. It is not an easy matchup for Pablo Lopez, but he is absolutely one of the best pitchers on this slate. So with that, it makes some sense that he's getting ownership. Now, projection 18, 1.7x. Generally at 10.6K, you'd like that to be a little higher, but it is a smaller slate, so we're going to probably have to take some chances at pitcher a little bit. Next, we got Merrill Kelly. This is a really interesting matchup for me. So Merrill Kelly has been very good this season. Not quite as good lately, but he does have some strikeout upside, 26% K rate. But the days that he's really on, his K rate really jumps up, and Cincinnati is striking out 27%. So while we only have it at 1.7x value, I think there is real high upside here at his price. And slightly less owned than Pablo Lopez. So I think it is interesting to consider Kelly as well as Lopez. Next, we got Justin Steele, 1.8x. So all these three highest owned pitchers, very similar projection. So the thing with Pittsburgh is they're not that good versus lefties. They don't hit the ball hard. They have a low WOBA. They strike out at 24%. I think this is a matchup that Steele can really, really do some damage in. So I think it's fairly interesting here. The Pirates have done decently versus Steele in the past, but this guy is a pitcher that just keeps getting better and has improved year over year. And his last matchups, were a year ago. So I think he is a little bit different of a pitcher now, a little bit better than he was last year. So I wouldn't take too much into consideration here with the BVP data. Plus, it is only 30 plate attempts, which, it's a little over a game worth of plate attempts. Next, we got Heaney. Now, this is the point where ownership is really starting to drop. He is down to 26%. All the other guys were 34 plus. Heaney, he's fairly cheap. He's been pitching much better lately. A FIP of 3, 24% K rate. I think there is some interest here. Twins strike out a lot, 23% versus lefties. They're not that good. 294 WOBA versus lefties. I think there is some real interest here. He's a little bit lower owned, a value of 2%. 2x. I would not mind going here whatsoever. Skoltens is next. This guy has been pitching decent lately. 3.82 FIP over his last 5 starts, 22% K rate, 24% combined K rate versus Oakland. And Oakland's just not that great versus righties. So I think there is some interest here. However, there is some weather concerns, possible delay, and it's, mid-90s and wind blowing out, so that ball will travel a little bit. So it is a little bit of a scary spot for Skoltens, but he does have a nice 2.6x value, and he's cheap, so you'll be able to pay up for some hitters. Jose Barrios, 2x value, 16-point projection. Barrios has been fairly solid on the year, 3.39 ERA, striking out 22%. Orioles strike out 24% here. I don't mind going here. Once again, though, this is a weather situation that we do need to watch closer to game time. Make sure that there's not likely to be delays. But at 18% on a 5-game slate, I would say he's very, very interesting. Ken Waldachuk, I think White Sox might be fairly chalky today, but that White Sox lineup, I said White Sox. It's like the old tongue twister. How much woodchuck would a woodchuck chuck? Woodchuck could chuck wood. It's Waldachuk could chuck a lot of wood if Waldachuk could chuck wood. White Sox striking out a lot versus lefties. They're not that good versus lefties. There's only a couple guys that can really get to them. The thing with Waldachuk, though, is he's averaging 42% less fantasy points away. He does have some upside because he does have a nice little K rate, especially lately is a 27% K rate. The combined K rate, 28%. So, Waldachuk is kind of interesting here. Nobody's going to be going here, and White Sox might be a little bit chalky. So it's not a terrible kind of leverage pick there. Brandon Williamson, he's a guy that I love to pick on, and I've been picking on him all season long in prop bets. I will continue to do so. I do not think he's very good. But you can't throw out the fact that the Diamondbacks aren't that good versus lefties. Now, he does give up 45% fly balls, decent hard contact rate, some barrel balls. But when it comes down to it, he doesn't miss many bats, and the Diamondbacks have so much speed that they can really, really make people pay if people are getting on base, and he tends to let people on base. Kyle Gibson, 8,200 versus Blue Jays. Gibson has been pretty good this year, and especially as of late, 3.7 FIP over his last 20. K rate, a little lower than you'd like, 20%, but 23% lately over the last 5. 23% combined K rate. He's just a low-owned pitcher that you probably need to consider on this small of a slate. Andre Jackson is getting some love here. Look, he's had a solid K rate as of late at 5.86x. He is interesting. Now, I think the situation here is that Pittsburgh hasn't officially let us know who their starter is, and thus we don't have the data up. But I can tell you, if it is Andre Jackson with his elevated K rate, you should probably consider him in this spot against the Cubs, who also can strike out a decent spot. But, big but here, once again, we need to look at the weather here in Pittsburgh. This is another spot that's a little scary. Definitely could be a delay or some sort of postponement. We only have 5 games today, and I think 3 of them have some sort of weather concern. So weather is going to play a big part of this slate. Now let's get into FanDuel since we've gone over every single pitcher. All right. Merrill Kelly, 10.2K, 34%. Pablo Lopez, 10.9K, 32%. I think Justin Steele, 10.4K at 15% is very interesting. So look, there are the 3 highest owned pitchers, are also the 3 expensive pitchers. So what this is telling me is that if you pay down at pitcher on FanDuel, pay up for bats, you are going to be so different than everybody else in the field. With that, I think it is much more interesting than normal to pay down a little bit. So Heaney becomes a little more interesting. Skoltens is a little more interesting. Waldachuk is a little more interesting. You're taking a big risk there, but you'll have major leverage on the field if an expensive offense goes off and, a lower owned, cheaper pitcher does well enough. They don't necessarily need to outscore the 10K guys, but they need to do well enough, and your expensive bats have to come through. But there is major leverage on FanDuel paying down a little bit at pitcher today. So that is very interesting. All right, let's get over to DraftKings. Let's check out some stacks. All right, so our highest owned, as I figured it would be, is the White Sox. Waldachuk's just not that great. He is a nice little leverage pitcher today, going against the highest owned offense. But this is a spot that I think is a very interesting one. But I do need to bring up the fact that with a 5-game slate, only 100% owned as the highest pitcher or highest stack is kind of surprising to me. It's really showing that ownership is fairly spread out between teams. And with that, you might be able to just kind of play whoever you want to and still be able to get a little bit different. Gibson, or Toronto picking on Gibson is next. You know, I think Gibson's been a pretty solid pitcher so far this year. Really hasn't got, like, blown up much. So I don't love this stack trying to pick on him. But I get it. I mean, we got to go somewhere on 5 games. And Toronto is a dangerous offense. So now let's go to our highest projected. So the LineStar highest projected, we got the Cubs. So, as we mentioned, this might be Andre Jackson. We aren't sure. Jackson is a guy that's not likely to work too deep into the game, but he does have a high K rate. So, you know, you got to consider him. But with that, he does hit hard. So, I think the Cubs are interesting. Also, we have Cincinnati versus Merrill Kelly. Merrill Kelly's got beat up a little bit recently, so it makes some sense, especially when they're low owned and they have the kind of ceiling that Cincinnati does. So it's in a hitter-friendly ballpark, and, you know, while Kelly is a good pitcher, there's some merit to go there, especially with Kelly being a higher-owned pitcher. There's some leverage, and that Cincy offense is very good. All right, take a look at consensus real quick. All Cubs, Arizona. All right, so we're pretty similar to consensus today. All right, the value stack. We got Pittsburgh going against Steele. Steele's been a super good pitcher. He is a more of a ground ball pitcher, so he definitely limits home runs. I don't love trying to pick on him because of that, but what happens with ground ball pitchers a lot is when they are making mistakes, the ball gets elevated a little bit, and therefore home runs happen. So when he makes mistakes, Pittsburgh could make him pay. And Pitt is an offense that has some power, has some steal, has some speed. They're cheap. I think there is some level of interest there. White Sox popping up, no surprise there, and Diamondbacks as well. All are interesting. Now, if we go to the ceiling plays, we got Texas versus Pablo Lopez. Major leverage there, as Lopez is one of the higher owned pitchers on both sites. Texas is one of the most dangerous offenses, so this is a spot where, as I said, it's major leverage going with a higher priced stack, lower priced pitcher today, just because the high owned pitcher or higher priced pitchers are all fairly expensive today. Higher owned guys are fairly expensive, that is. Baltimore makes some sense here. Berrios hasn't been as great lately, and we have seen when he gets shelled, he gets really shelled. So Baltimore is of interest there. Let's just make sure I'm not missing anything here. We've pretty much talked about every single team. I think we do need to bring up at least Minnesota stack, just because Heaney has got shelled throughout this year. Also, you need to talk about the Oakland stack. We have really good hitting weather. Skoltens isn't, that great. He has been pitching well lately, but there is rain delay chances, and we know the bullpen of the White Sox is terrible. So I think Oakland is a very interesting stack that is likely to go lower owned than they should. They're also in that same game environment that's making the White Sox the highest owned stack. So it makes no sense that there's such a big ownership difference from those two teams. Cincinnati, you got to consider. Pittsburgh, meh. And then obviously Texas being probably the best offense outside of maybe Baltimore on today's slate. They're major leverage, and with how good they are, they can beat any pitcher on the day. All it takes is Pablo Lopez to be just off a little bit. All right, guys, that will do it for us today. You guys have a great afternoon. Good luck tonight, and I will be back tomorrow. Let's win some money. Adios.